I'm moving on from the Kemper. Here's why. It's IkeGuitar. Let's do this. So today, guys, we're going over why I'm moving away from the Kemper. And honestly, I've really enjoyed my Kemper. I've had the Kemper for about 5 years now. Got it in 2018 or so. And I've really enjoyed using it. It was, at the time, a state-of-the-art modeling amplifier. Essentially, a modeler is a device that captures the qualities of an amplifier in the moment that it's captured and allows you to get some very excellent sounds. And for Kemper, it was pretty much spot on. There obviously is going to be some kind of preference to whether or not Kemper truly captures every nuance of an amplifier. But for the sake of my live gigs and what I did as an industry professional, it got my job done for me, and I couldn't have been happier with my experience with the Kemper. But obviously, I wouldn't be telling you that I'm moving on if I wasn't moving on. So I want to go through with you guys a few reasons why I'm moving on from the Kemper in favor of some different things we'll talk about in a later video. So I think the biggest thing that made me move on from the Kemper is that technology has caught up to them, surpassed them, and yet, you know, they have failed to innovate in a lot of ways. Now guys, with things like the Quad Cortex, the X-FX3, and the Line 6 Helix, modeling has become just the thing of the day, right? I remember back in the day, the all-encompassing effects processors were like the Pod HD 500 and the Pod Kidney and all of these things. But when Kemper released the Profiler, it was a big deal. People could finally capture real amps, and it sounded pretty darn close to what the amp was supposed to sound like in that moment in time, with some limitations, obviously. I've just found that other technologies have surpassed and moved past the Kemper, and although the Kemper has released things like the Kemper Stage and the Kemper Cone, the Kemper Cabinet, those things have failed to resonate with me as a guitar player because, one, I don't need to carry around all that gear. The whole point was just to have one simple thing. And the fact that the Kemper, for a lot of its great abilities to profile amplifiers, their effects were not that great. Honestly, we didn't get a good reverb until a couple years after the Kemper was released. The drives have never been my favorite. And so for me, I was using my Kemper mainly as just the amp head, really. I used the profile toaster, put my pedal board into it, and it was great for what I needed it for. I never really used the Kemper all-in-one solution. Now, I did manage to make some rigs that I felt like sounded really great. I think some guitars do, but I found that over time, I just went back to my pedals. You know, I've invested a lot of money into the pedals, and honestly, I got more bang for my buck buying an individual pedal than buying a Kemper rig for over $2,000, theoretically. So I found that when it comes to other things on the market, like the UA Dream, the Ruby, the Woodrow, and all these pedals in the market that are continuing to blow me away with how great they sound, I've realized I don't need the Kemper as much for what it gave me, which was an amp sound, and that's all it really did for me. Now, the other thing, of course, with the failure to innovate also came with, lack of support from the actual Kemper developer team. And Kemper was very fortunate early in that a lot of professional guitar players adopted Kemper very early on. People like Tom Hemby and Mike Britt, like these session greats, guitar players, incredible. They just adopted the Kemper early. A lot of the industry did early as well because there was nothing else on the market, right, at the time. Instead of Kemper supporting their customer base, they had the forums and stuff like that, and they had some updates generally. But what we had was people like Mike Britt taking incredible amps and profiling them for us and selling those profiles to us so we could have great amps. Kemper stock amps were never that good. They weren't that incredible. And I think that's just part of really what Kemper relied on was the community around itself to grow. And I think for a company to do that, super smart, right? But for me, I need a little bit more buy-in from a company in regards to support and making better features. And because the Kemper Profiler, the actual box, the format, came out in like 2016, right? They haven't updated that since then, right? They had the Kemper Stage, but it's okay. Like it has the Bluetooth function that I wanted for my actual Kemper Profiler, right? I needed the Bluetooth option, and they didn't give me a desktop app until like 4 years into the process. So for me, I felt like Kemper support, developer support, really wasn't jiving with what I needed from a company in regards to guitar sounds, and I moved on from that, for sure. Now we'll do a whole video of like pros and cons of buying a Kemper, because there honestly still is a lot of good reasons to buy a Kemper profiler. The Kemper does offer you really great sounding amp sounds if you do know how to profile correctly, which is a whole art in itself. You can also buy amps from other people, which I've described to you guys already in a previous point. So for Kemper, they already have the backbone of a great community. They already have a decent product. I think for anybody wanting to get into the modeling space, right, begin to future-proof, because there's so much happening in the guitar world right now that's shaking up the modeler industry, right? We've got the Quad Cortex, which I feel like has a long way to go, but is still a great option for people who want to get into that game early. And then we've got things like the UA Audio Dream, Woodrow, and Ruby, which I've talked about before. I'm going to do a more detailed video on those 3 pedals as well, kind of show you guys why those pedals are great in and of themselves. But for those of you going into, do I buy a Kemper or do I not buy a Kemper, think about how much you need a Kemper and don't buy into the hype. Okay, you can find great sounds with just a few pedals and you'll be just as happy. And I still feel like amps are still superior in how they perform, and it's so tough to take a computer generated instance of an amp profiler and an amp profile and attempt to find every single point and every single dial preset and allow the computer to make those adjustments in the algorithm for you, as opposed to hand on the knob, turning it, hitting the power amp, all that stuff. So, but would I still use a Kemper? Yes, I would, and here's where I'd use it. If I had unlimited money and could do whatever I want, I'd have a rack unit with the Kemper inside. I'd have a Kemper rack unit, a couple other rack units from other guitar modelers, just to have that diversity, so that when guys come to the studio to record guitar tracks, I can pull up my Kemper rack unit and use their amps. We're gonna have pedals anyway, why not use it? The issue with me is being able to carry all that stuff to and from gigs gets to be a hassle and not quite worth it when I have better options out there. So if you like the video, please consider subscribing. I make videos all the time. If you like this video, tell me more about what you want to use in the field, right? Is it the Kemper? Is the Kemper gonna make it another 5 to 10 years? Not that major innovation. And do you think that other things may take its place, or do you think the Kemper has staying power? Do you think the idea of the Kemper is still going to be romantic to many guitar players and make them move to that? I know a lot of people are still using Kempers. I've moved on, but have you? That's the question. Have a great one, guys, and we'll see you next time on IkeGuitar.